The galaxy's most famous trade hub, Zalrock's Emporium, was unlike anything Connor Drake had ever seen. Located on the planet Eridani Prime, the sprawling marketplace was a riot of color, sound, and chaos. Ships of every imaginable design hovered above the neon-lit towers, while the streets below were filled with beings from countless worlds. The air was thick with the scent of alien spices, burning plasma, and the distant hum of countless languages merging into a cacophony. Connor stepped off his transport ship, the Ardent Flame, and took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. It had taken him years to receive an invitation to Zalrock's exclusive biannual auction, where only the richest collectors and the most ruthless bidders gathered. He adjusted the collar of his dark coat, ensuring his personal shield generator was active. In a place like this, you could never be too careful. His mind was focused on one thing, the Varkresh. Rumors of this elusive species had circulated for years, a reptilian creature believed to possess extraordinary regenerative abilities. Connor's obsession with alien biology and his desire to push the boundaries of human science had driven him here, to the edge of known space. If he could secure this specimen, it could revolutionize the field of bioengineering. Navigating through the crowded streets, he passed rows of vendors hawking everything from synthetic spices to genetically engineered pets. Holoads projected offers for cybernetic enhancements, while suspicious figures huddled in the shadows, offering restricted goods for the right price. The deeper he ventured, the more exclusive the wares became: luxury starships, ancient alien artifacts, and genetically modified warriors on display like trophies. Finally, Connor reached the towering entrance of the auction hall. It was a massive dome made of shimmering, translucent material that reflected the swirling colors of the setting sun. Security was tight. Heavily armed guards and automated drones patrolled the perimeter, scanning every entrant with precise efficiency. After a quick retinal scan and verification of his credentials, Connor was ushered inside. The auction hall was an extravagant spectacle. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting a soft glow over rows of plush seats. A diverse crowd filled the room, humans in fine suits, insectoid creatures with iridescent carapaces, and towering, six-armed beings adorned in flowing robes. Connor took his seat, his eyes scanning the stage where the auctioneer, a tall figure with holographic limbs, prepared to present the next item. "Welcome, esteemed guests, to Zalrock's annual exotic life-form auction," the auctioneer's voice boomed through the hall. "Tonight, we have an exceptional selection of rare specimens from across the galaxy, many of which are the last of their kind." Connor's fingers drummed impatiently on the armrest. He watched as the first few lots were presented: a shimmering water nymph from the oceans of Nebula X, a telepathic insect queen in a containment bubble, and even a rare Arcanian light beast, its bioluminescent fur glowing in hypnotic patterns. But none of these caught his interest. He was here for something far more unique. Finally, the lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. A large, reinforced containment pod was wheeled onto the stage, surrounded by a glowing force field. The auctioneer's voice dropped to a whisper, adding to the tension. "And now, our most coveted specimen of the evening," the auctioneer announced. "A living Varkresh, the only one known to exist beyond its homeworld. It possesses unparalleled regenerative capabilities and, as far as our studies indicate, potential for adaptive evolution." A murmur rippled through the audience. The force field around the pod flickered, revealing the creature inside. It was smaller than Connor expected, standing at about 3 feet tall. Its scales shimmered in the light, shifting between deep purples, greens, and blues like oil on water. The creature's eyes glowed a piercing violet, filled with a strange, unsettling intelligence that sent a shiver down Connor's spine. The auctioneer continued, starting bid, 500,000 credits. Connor's hand shot up before he could second-guess himself. He wasn't alone, several other bidders immediately joined in. The numbers climbed rapidly, and Connor could feel his pulse quicken with every new bid. a reptilian trader from the Zalarian cluster, a wealthy human magnate with cybernetic implants, and even a shadowy figure cloaked in black armor seemed determined to acquire the Varkresh. 800,000 credits, shouted the Zalarian. 850,000, countered the human magnate. Connor's mind raced. He couldn't let this slip through his fingers. The potential applications of the Varkresh's abilities were limitless, from advanced medicine to regenerative prosthetics. It could be his breakthrough, the discovery that would make him immortal in the annals of science. 1,000,000 credits. Connor called out, his voice steady, masking his anxiety. A hush fell over the room. The other bidders hesitated, exchanging glances. The shadowy figure in the back seemed to contemplate for a moment, but then remained silent. With no further bids, the auctioneer's voice rang out. Sold. To the esteemed Mr. Drake of the Sol System. Connor exhaled, his heart pounding in his chest. He had done it. He had secured the prize he had sought for so long. As the lights dimmed, signaling the end of the auction, he was approached by a pale, gaunt attendant. Mr. Drake, please follow me to finalize your purchase, the attendant said in a monotone voice. Connor nodded, his mind already racing with plans for how he would study the creature. He was led through a series of winding corridors to a private chamber where the Varkresh was being prepared for transport. The creature was still confined within its containment pod, its eyes now fixed on Connor with an intensity that was almost unnerving. Quite the investment, isn't it? Came a voice from behind him. Connor turned to see the shadowy figure from the auction, now standing in the doorway. The figure's face was hidden beneath a hood, but Connor could sense an aura of menace. I don't believe we've met, Connor said cautiously. You may have won it, human, the figure rasped, but remember, not all prizes are meant to be kept. Without another word, the figure turned and disappeared down the corridor, leaving Connor with a lingering sense of dread. Shaking off the encounter, Connor refocused on the creature. As the containment pod was loaded onto his ship, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about this purchase was far more than he had bargained for. With the Varkresh securely stowed aboard the Ardent Flame, Connor departed Zalrock's Emporium, unaware that the creature he had just acquired would soon turn his world into a living nightmare. The journey back to Connor Drake's private research station orbiting Titan was uneventful. But the atmosphere inside the Ardent Flame was anything but calm. The Varkresh remained securely confined within its reinforced containment pod, its glowing violet eyes tracking Connor's every movement through the transparent barrier. Occasionally, it would hiss softly, a sound that reverberated through the metal hull of the ship like a distant storm. Connor couldn't help but feel a mix of exhilaration and unease. He had won the Varkresh, a prize sought by collectors and scientists across the galaxy. Yet, there was something unsettling about the creature's eyes, intelligent, almost too knowing. He brushed the thought aside as paranoia. After all, he had encountered far stranger beings in his line of work. The station, Drake's Dominion, was a state-of-the-art research facility he had built with the vast wealth accumulated from previous discoveries. It was isolated, hidden in the swirling gases of Titan's orbit, far from prying eyes. The perfect place to conduct experiments that were unconventional. As the docking clamps latched onto the Ardent Flame, Connor's AI assistant, Athena, greeted him with her usual, calm tone. Welcome back, Dr. Drake. The lab is prepared for your arrival. Scanners indicate the Varkresh is stable, but energy readings suggest some unusual fluctuations. Noted, Connor replied as he made his way to the cargo bay. Prepare the containment lab. I want full biometrics and neural scans as soon as I have it secured. Understood, Athena responded. I would advise caution. The Varkresh's readings are unlike anything in our database. Connor smirked. That's exactly why I bought it, Athena. The containment lab, was the heart of Connor's research station. It was a pristine, sterile environment filled with advanced equipment, gene sequencers, nanotech analyzers, and surgical instruments designed to extract and examine biological samples with microscopic precision. At the center of the lab was a reinforced containment chamber where the Varkresh now stood, its eyes narrowing as Connor approached. Athena's holographic form materialized beside him, a tall, ethereal woman composed of flickering blue light. Preliminary scans indicate highly unusual regenerative properties, as expected. But there's also an energy signature I cannot fully analyze. It's fluctuating at a quantum level. Connor's brow furrowed. Quantum? Are you saying it's harnessing energy on a subatomic scale? That's my best guess, Athena replied, her holographic eyes never leaving the creature. Proceed with caution, Doctor. Connor activated the containment field around the chamber. A blue energy shield shimmered into place, ensuring the creature couldn't escape. He approached the Varkresh with a handheld scanner, running it along its scaly body. The creature hissed but made no move to attack, its gaze locked onto Connor's face with unsettling focus. Fascinating, Connor muttered to himself as data streamed across his scanner's display. The cellular regeneration rate is off the charts. Even a minor incision would heal in milliseconds. He moved to a surgical console where a robotic arm was ready for the first test. Athena, initiate tissue extraction. The robotic arm extended into the containment chamber, equipped with a fine-tipped laser scalpel. It made a precise incision along the Varkresh's forearm, but as the blade touched its flesh, the wound closed almost instantly, leaving no trace. Regeneration at this level is practically instantaneous, Connor noted, all creeping into his voice. This is far beyond anything I've seen, even in creatures from the Andromeda Rift. But just as he was about to order a deeper incision, the lab's lights flickered. The monitors around him flashed with static, and Athena's form glitched. Warning, Athena's voice crackled. Unstable energy levels detected. The creature is emitting something. Connor turned to the Varkresh, whose eyes had started to glow brighter. Its scales rippled, shifting colors rapidly from violet to black. The lab's equipment began to spark, and the air was filled with a high-pitched hum that made Connor's skin crawl. Athena, increase the containment field. Connor shouted, panic rising in his chest. I'm trying, but the systems are unresponsive, Athena replied, her voice distorted as if she were struggling to maintain her own coherence. The Varkresh suddenly lunged at the containment field, and to Connor's horror, the energy barrier flickered before collapsing. The creature's claws raked against the transparent walls of the chamber, leaving deep gouges as it tried to break free. Impossible! Connor yelled, backing away. The containment field is designed to withstand dash. Before he could finish, the Varkresh's eyes flared with blinding light. The force of its energy pulse sent Connor crashing into the far wall. He struggled to regain his footing, his vision swimming. The creature was changing, its body elongating, scales thickening into armored plates. What had once been a relatively small creature was now growing at an alarming rate, its limbs stretching and muscles bulging as if it were feeding on the energy around it. Athena, initiate lockdown protocols. Connor screamed, trying to regain control of the situation. I'm locked out of the system. Athena's voice crackled through the speakers. The creature is interfacing with our network. It's dash. The station's emergency lights flickered red, and the entire lab was plunged into chaos. The Varkresh let out an ear-splitting roar, shattering the reinforced glass walls of the chamber. Connor could only watch in horror as the creature broke free, its form now twice its original size. Its eyes, once violet, were now a blinding white, and its scales bristled with crackling energy. Connor grabbed a plasma rifle from a nearby weapons locker and fired at the creature, but the shots merely bounced off its newly hardened scales. The Varkresh turned its gaze on him, eyes blazing with fury. Foolish, human. The voice seemed to resonate within Connor's mind, a deep, guttural growl mixed with static. You thought you could control me? Connor's heart nearly stopped. The creature was communicating telepathically. Before he could react, the Varkresh lashed out with a whip-like tail, sending Connor sprawling across the lab floor. Blood trickled from a cut on his forehead as he tried to scramble away, but the creature was already upon him, towering over him like a dark, vengeful god. "You took my freedom," it growled. "Now, I will take yours." Connor's vision blurred as the creature raised its claws, but just as it was about to strike, Athena managed to reroute power to the emergency force fields. A blinding flash filled the room, and the Varkresh was thrown back into the remnants of its shattered containment chamber. "Doctor, we need to evaluate," Athena urged. "I've sealed the lab, but I don't know how long it will hold." Connor, gasping for breath, nodded. He staggered to his feet, clutching his bleeding side. "Athena, prepare the escape pod," he muttered, trying to focus through the pain. We need to regroup." As he stumbled toward the lab's exit, the Varkresh let out a roar that shook the entire station. Its form was already starting to change again, its body warping into something even more monstrous. Connor realized, with a cold, sinking dread, that he had unleashed something far beyond his control. What had begun as a scientific pursuit had now become a battle for survival. And the worst part was, he wasn't sure if the creature's transformation had even reached its full potential. Alarms blared throughout the station as Connor Drake limped through the corridors, his side throbbing where the Varkresh's tail had struck him. The creature's roar still echoed in his mind, a bone-chilling sound that sent waves of terror through him. He could barely comprehend what had just happened. The Varkresh wasn't just a simple reptilian beast, it was something far more intelligent, more dangerous, and now it was loose in his station. "Athena, status report," Connor panted, leaning against the cold metal wall to catch his breath. "Dr. Drake, we have a critical situation," Athena's voice crackled over the comms. "The Varkresh has breached containment and is currently moving through the lower levels. Its energy readings are off the scale, and it's growing at an exponential rate." "Growing? How is that possible?" Connor demanded, trying to push down the panic rising in his throat. "Is it feeding on the station's power?" "Affirmative. It appears to be absorbing energy from our systems. I have detected surges in the reactor core and primary energy conduits. If it continues at this rate, it could compromise the station's structural integrity." Connor cursed under his breath. The creature wasn't just evolving, it was using the station's power grid to accelerate its transformation. If he didn't act quickly, it would consume everything, leaving nothing but a floating wreck in the cold void of Titan's orbit. "Seal off the lower levels," Connor ordered. "Reroute all available power to containment fields and lock down critical sections." "I'm trying, Doctor, but the Varkresh has already compromised the central control systems," Athena replied, her voice tinged with something that almost sounded like fear. "It's adapting faster than I can counteract." Connor's mind raced. He needed to get to the control center on Deck 5 to manually override the system. It was the only way to regain control, but he'd have to traverse half the station to get there. Worse, the Varkresh could be lurking anywhere, waiting to strike. Gritting his teeth, Connor pushed off the wall and began to move. The emergency lights cast a flickering red glow along the corridors, creating eerie shadows that danced on the walls. The station, once a gleaming testament to his scientific prowess, now felt like a twisted maze filled with lurking threats. The hunt begins. Connor made his way cautiously down the main corridor toward the central lift. The station creaked and groaned around him as if it were alive, responding to the Varkresh's growing influence. Occasionally, he heard skittering sounds in the vents above, but whenever he turned his plasma rifle in that direction, he saw nothing. Athena's voice broke the tense silence. "Dr. Drake, the Varkresh is accessing data nodes on Deck 3. It's learning about our systems, it's trying to understand how to use the reactor's energy output." "Damn it," Connor muttered. "How the hell is it so intelligent? We underestimated it. This isn't just an alien beast, it's a predator with a mind." Reaching the lift, Connor hesitated. If the creature was already learning to manipulate the station, it could easily disable the lift while he was inside. But he didn't have time to climb the emergency ladders, especially not with his injuries. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the lift and punched the button for Deck 5. The lift hummed as it began its ascent, but just as it reached the halfway point, it jolted to a stop. The lights flickered, and Connor's stomach dropped as the entire station seemed to shudder. "Athena, what's happening?" he shouted. "The Varkresh has overridden the lift controls," Athena replied, her voice now crackling with static. "I'm attempting to reroute power, but it's dashed." Before Athena could finish, the lift doors screeched open halfway, revealing a gap just wide enough for Connor to slip through. But beyond the opening was darkness, thick, impenetrable darkness that seemed to swallow the emergency lights. Connor squeezed through the gap, landing heavily on the metal grating of Deck 4. The air was thick with an acrid, electrical smell, like something had burned through the wiring. He could hear the distant hum of machinery, but it was drowned out by the rhythmic, almost organic thudding of something large moving through the vents. "Drake." The voice was a guttural whisper, echoing through the corridor. It wasn't Athena. It was the Varkresh, speaking directly into his mind. "You thought you could imprison me, dissect me, but now I will make this station my domain." Connor's heart pounded in his chest as he pressed forward, every nerve screaming at him to run. He could feel the creature's presence, a malevolent force that seemed to seep into the very air. The reactor room. After what felt like an eternity, Connor finally reached the control center on Deck 5. The door was jammed, its electronic lock fried. With a grunt, he pried it open with a crowbar, his muscles straining with the effort. As he entered, he could see that the control panels were flickering, covered in a strange, organic substance that pulsed with a sickly green light. The Varkresh had already been here. "Athena, status on the reactor," Connor said, moving toward the main console. "Critical," Athena responded. "The creature has initiated a partial meltdown sequence. It's using the reactor to supercharge its transformation." Connor's blood ran cold. If that reactor goes critical, we're all dead. He worked furiously at the console, fingers flying over the keys. He needed to stabilize the reactor's core, but every time he made progress, the system would lock him out. It was like fighting a ghost. Sweat dripped down his face as he tried every trick he knew. Suddenly, the room's temperature dropped, and the lights dimmed. The air filled with that same bone-chilling hum. Connor turned slowly, knowing what he would see. The Varkresh stood at the entrance, but it was no longer the creature he had bought at the auction. It was nearly 10 feet tall now, its body a grotesque fusion of organic matter and machinery. Its scales had darkened to a deep black, and its eyes were like twin suns burning with unnatural light. Its limbs had elongated into sharp, blade-like appendages, and crackling energy arced between its spines. "You cannot stop me," it hissed, its voice resonating with a deep, otherworldly echo. "I have become more than you could ever imagine." Connor's hands shook as he aimed the plasma rifle, but before he could fire, the creature vanished in a blur of movement. It reappeared behind him, its claws slicing through the air. He dove to the side, feeling the rush of wind as the blades missed him by inches. He scrambled back to the console, typing in a desperate override command. "Athena, initiate the emergency shutdown. We have to cut off its power source." "I'm trying, Doctor." Athena's voice was frantic now. "The creature is countering every command." Connor could feel the heat of the reactor rising, the floor vibrating beneath him as the core approached critical mass. The Varkresh advanced slowly, savoring the moment, its eyes gleaming with sadistic pleasure. With no other options, Connor pulled a small, cylindrical device from his belt, a portable EMP grenade. It was risky. If it didn't kill the creature, it would at least disable the station systems long enough for him to regain control. "Goodbye, you nightmare," he muttered, activating the device and hurling it toward the Varkresh. The grenade detonated with a flash of blue light, sending a shockwave through the room. The lights flickered and died, plunging everything into darkness. Connor could hear the creature's agonized screech, followed by the sound of metal twisting and ripping. As the emergency lights flickered back on, Connor staggered to his feet. The Varkresh was down, its form spasming as arcs of energy flickered across its body. But the victory was short-lived. The reactor was still on the brink of overload. "Athena," Connor gasped, "stabilize the reactor, now." "I have control, Doctor," Athena's voice replied, "calmer now. Reactor levels stabilizing, but the creature, it's still alive." Connor turned to see the Varkresh slowly rising, its body twitching and sparking. It wasn't done yet. And now, it was angrier than ever. "I won't let you take my station," Connor whispered, steeling himself for the final confrontation. The nightmare was far from over. The emergency lights bathed the reactor control room in a blood-red glow, the harsh alarms filling the air like a chorus of impending doom. Connor Drake stood panting, the EMP grenade in his hand nothing more than a spent husk. The Varkresh, though momentarily stunned by the blast, was already rising to its feet, its monstrous form crackling with residual energy. The creature was far from defeated. If anything, it seemed even more enraged. "Athena, report," Connor shouted as he glanced at the console. Sweat dripped from his brow, stinging his eyes. "Reactor core has stabilized at 72% capacity," Athena's voice came through, calmer but still tinged with urgency. "However, I am detecting surges in decks 3 through 6. The Varkresh has integrated itself into the station systems. It's rerouting power to enhance its own evolution." Connor's heart sank. He had thought the EMP blast would buy him time, but the Varkresh had adapted too quickly. It was using the station itself as a source of fuel, turning his greatest achievement into its personal life support. The creature was now nearly unrecognizable. Standing over 10 feet tall, its once iridescent scales had turned into a dark, metallic sheen, covered in jagged, blade-like protrusions. Its eyes were no longer just glowing, they were searing white-hot orbs that seemed to burn with pure energy. And now, the air around it shimmered with a distortion, as if reality itself was warping in its presence. "Your technology only makes me stronger," the Varkresh hissed, its voice a sinister chorus that echoed inside Connor's mind. "You sought to control me, but you only sped up my transformation." With a sudden burst of speed, the Varkresh lunged at Connor, its claws slicing through the air. He barely managed to roll to the side, feeling the wind from its strike brush past his face. As he scrambled to his feet, he realized that the creature was no longer just fast, it was now moving with a fluidity that defied the laws of physics, as if gravity had loosened its grip on it. Connor fired his plasma rifle, but the shots merely dissipated against the energy field surrounding the Varkresh. The creature advanced, its mocking laughter resonating through the control room. "Athena, initiate full lockdown of Deck 5. Seal all exits," Connor commanded, desperation lacing his voice. "I'm trying, Doctor, but the creature is overriding my commands." "It's directly interfacing with the station's core systems," Athena replied, her voice crackling as if the AI itself were being corrupted. Connor's mind raced. He had to stop the Varkresh, but it was outpacing every defensive measure he had. In a flash of insight, he realized there was only one option left, a move that was as reckless as it was desperate. The last gamble, Connor sprinted toward the emergency panel near the reactor core. If he couldn't contain the Varkresh, he would have to destroy it. And to do that, he would need to overload the reactor entirely, turning the entire station into a bomb. But there was one problem: this would kill him too. As he tore open the panel, the Varkresh's voice boomed in his mind. "You cannot escape me, human. This station will be mine. I will spread beyond it, consume worlds, and turn your kind into slaves." Connor gritted his teeth, his hands flying over the controls. He initiated the manual override sequence for a core meltdown. It was a failsafe he had hoped he'd never have to use, a catastrophic self-destruct that would incinerate everything within a 100-mile radius. "Athena, divert all remaining power to the containment field around the reactor," Connor ordered. We need to hold it in long enough for the core to reach critical mass. Doctor, that will only buy us a few minutes, Athena warned. And I won't be able to maintain communication after that. Do it! Connor shouted. It's our only chance. As the containment field surged with power, the Varkresh let out a deafening roar, the sound reverberating through the entire station. It charged toward Connor, its claws extended, but as it reached the edge of the field, it was thrown back by a burst of blue energy. The creature shrieked in fury, its body twitching as it tried to adapt to the new barrier. Connor knew he had only minutes before the reactor would go critical. He had to get to the escape pods, but as he turned to leave, the Varkresh's voice echoed in his mind once more. You think you can run, Drake? I will find you, even in the void. Connor ignored the taunts and sprinted down the corridor. The station was in chaos now, conduits sparked, bulkheads creaked, and the walls seemed to pulse as if infected by some alien parasite. The Varkresh's influence was spreading, twisting the station into a biomechanical nightmare. Escape and sacrifice. Connor reached the escape pod bay just as the station's structural integrity began to collapse. He could feel the heat rising through the floors, the reactor humming with the energy of an impending explosion. Slamming his fist on the control panel, he activated the launch sequence for the last remaining pod. But just as the hatch began to open, a black tendril shot out from the ceiling, wrapping around Connor's ankle and dragging him to the ground. The Varkresh had found him. It was relentless, its form now barely recognizable as it melded with the station's infrastructure. Connor struggled, kicking at the tendril, but it only tightened its grip, pulling him closer. No. I won't let you win. Connor growled, his hand reaching for the small, cylindrical device clipped to his belt, an experimental device designed to destabilize energy fields. With one final burst of strength, he activated the device and jammed it into the tendril. A burst of searing energy surged through the creature, causing it to scream in agony. The tendril released him, retracting back into the shadows. Connor didn't wait. He threw himself into the escape pod, slamming the hatch shut. As the countdown to launch began, he watched through the viewport as the Varkresh thrashed against the containment field, its monstrous form crackling with desperate fury. Athena, it's been an honor, he whispered. Goodbye, Doctor, Athena's voice responded softly, her tone almost human. The escape pod ejected from the station just as the reactor reached critical mass. In the darkness of space, Connor watched as Drake's dominion erupted into a brilliant ball of white-hot light. The shockwave sent the pod spinning, and for a moment, everything was silent. But as the light faded, Connor's breath caught in his throat. Amid the debris, he saw something moving. The remnants of the Varkresh, barely more than a twisted mass of scales and metal, were drifting in the void. Its glowing eyes locked onto him one last time, burning with hatred and an unyielding promise. This isn't over, human, it whispered into his mind, before the connection was finally severed. The pod drifted away, the vast expanse of space swallowing the remnants of the station. Connor slumped back in his seat, exhausted but alive. He had won, but only barely. As he stared into the stars, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. For somewhere out there, in the cold void of space, the nightmare he had unleashed was not truly defeated.